I'd like to welcome everyone to the New York Alternative Investment Roundtable monthly call for May 2022. I'm Robert Akeson of the Riverside Management Group, the moderator. And today we are very pleased to welcome back two New York area freshman congressional representatives, Ritchie Torres, a Democrat from New York, and Andrew Garbarino, a Republican for New York. Just a brief word about both men. Representative Andrew Garbarino is a representative for New York's 2nd District and is a member of the House Committee on Homeland Security and the House Committee on Small Business. Prior to winning his seat in Congress, he served 4 terms as a member of the New York State Assembly, where he represented the 7th District. During his tenure in the Assembly, he fought to increase state funding for Long Island school districts, to protect environment, including the Great South Bay, to oppose tax hikes, and to support law enforcement. Before joining the New York State Assembly, he worked as an attorney at the law firm of William R. Garbarino, his family's law firm. He holds a BA in History and Classical Humanities from the George Washington University and a Juris Doctorate from Hofstra University. Representative Ritchie Torres is a congressional representative for New York's 15th District and is vice chair of the House Committee on Homeland Security and a member of the House Committee on Financial Services. He is also a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, is chair of the Task Force on Economic Recovery for the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and is a member of the LGBTQ+ Equality Caucus, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Future Forum Caucus, and the Labor Caucus. Now, prior to being elected to Congress, Mr. Torres spent 7 years as a New York City Council member for the 15th District, where he served as the chair of the Committee on Public Housing and was a deputy majority leader. In 2013, at the age of 25, Mr. Torres became New York's youngest elected official and first openly LGBTQ person elected to office in the Bronx. As chair of the Oversight and Investigations Committee, he focused on taxi medallion predatory loans and New York City's third-party transfer program. So, gentlemen, I have to tell you, it's a pleasure to welcome you back. And looking forward to your comments on your experience in Congress. But before we dive into this very interesting and relevant topic, I want to thank our sponsors for their ongoing support of the Roundtable and this call. And of course, they include all the names you see up on the screen. Why don't we turn there you go. You see Alston Bird, Baker Tilly, Bloomberg, Deloitte, Grant Thornton, New Mountain Capital, our nonprofit sponsors, Kaya, the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, and the UK Department for International Trade. Just a reminder to everyone, the congressman will be answering my questions for approximately 45 to 50 minutes, and then we open it up to the audience. But as you'll see, Zoom gives us that feature down in the lower or on the right-hand side. If you want to send a question in to me as they are speaking, please do so. They are happy to take your questions at that time. One other programming note, we will be having our good friend Anthony Scaramucci from Skybridge join us on May 19th at 5:30. So by all means, please circle that date and join us. It'll be a live event here in New York City. So, gentlemen, let's get to it. Now, both of you have been in Congress for a little over a year now. And what I'm going to ask you is to please describe your experience as a freshman member of Congress. And I'd also like you to maybe touch on some of the accomplishments that you are especially proud of during this time. So, Representative Torres, why don't we start with you? How has it been?
Well, first, it's an honor to be here, especially with my colleague, Andrew Garbarino. It has been, when people ask me, what is it like to be in Congress? I tell them that my experience is unrepresentative. If someone had said to me that I would become a member of Congress during an infectious disease outbreak and witness an insurrection against the US Capitol and then vote to impeach an outgoing president and all of that would happen within the first 2 weeks. And then vote not on one, not on two, but three multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bills in the House, I would have said that sounds like a movie. So it's been an unusually eventful session.
And you've been busy, I suppose.
We've been busy. Congress is a frustrating place, especially for a freshman member. You have to aggressively assert yourself to have an impact because it is heavily skewed toward seniority, and that's especially true when it comes to the Democratic caucus. My impression is the Republican caucus might actually be more egalitarian, but the Democratic caucus is heavy on seniority. As far as achievements, look, I'm proud of the bipartisan infrastructure investment. It was a glimpse of bipartisanship.
Yes.
Period of peak polarization. And the New York delegation, and I give Andrew enormous credit because it was a much harder vote for him than it was for me. But we brought $100 billion in infrastructure funding to New York City. It's the largest investment in infrastructure in more than half a century. And so those are the moments that make congressional public service worthwhile. I took enormous pride in the expansion of the child tax credit before it expired, which cut child poverty by 50%, not only in the South Bronx, which I represent, but across the country. And then I know it's not popular among everyone, but I welcome the restoration of earmarks. We call them community funded projects. But I was able to secure a multi-million-dollar investment in school-based mental health centers that serve 1/4 of the student population in the Bronx. So I'm proud that as a freshman member, I've had a real impact in improving the lives of the people I represent.
Yes, and thank you. Representative Garbarino, please share your thoughts on this.
I think you could have, Ritchie, I think we could have written a movie just from the first week. That first 3 days. I remember somebody's like, take all these notes because you could write a book someday. I said, this would be a good opening chapter. It's Ritchie and I have had, it's interesting, he was in the majority, he's in the majority, I'm in the minority. We don't know what will play out next year. We'll see, but it's being a freshman in the minority. It's similar to being a freshman in the minority or freshman in the minority in the state assembly, because you don't get much information, and I don't know if Ritchie, how it is being in the majority and being a freshman, but being in the minority, we don't get much information until something is ready to move. Sometimes we find out what bills are being voted on the day of the bill, so it's tough to find that out, and by that time the amendment process has been closed. It's tough to get amendments in as a member of the minority. I will say, Ritchie brought it up though, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Not many people know this, but that bill was started amongst a discussion of, or the baseline for that bill was started amongst a discussion of bipartisan members of the Senate, bipartisan members of the House, and bipartisan governors. People call it the Biden infrastructure bill. This was something he had to jump on with. This was something that was being pushed away. It's supposed to be done through discussion, through negotiation amongst both sides to make sure that we got a good bill. Is it a great bill? No, it wasn't a great bill. I would have liked to see more money for sewers and some other things in there, but it was definitely something we needed. And we're going to have at least $100 billion going to New York over the next 5 years. That doesn't include, special pots of money that were set up that the administration can spend. This is money that's directly going to projects in New York State. As Ritchie also talked about the member projects. I spent 8 years in the state assembly. I did not get, we didn't get much money. If we were given $15,000 to hand out, for our entire district, that was a lot for a year. And I came from a heavily Republican area on Long Island, so it was usually ignored by the governor's office in the governor's budget. And so there were projects that needed to get done that hadn't gotten done. And now with the return of this directed spending, I was able to secure money last year, and I'm looking to secure more money for projects that had to get done, that were about 10, 15 years overdue. So that's something that I was very, very excited. And I've actually been signed. I've gotten bills signed into law. It's something that never happened in the state assembly. It was a rule. The majority never let us get statewide bills signed into law. I now have, I think, 8 or 9 of my bills in the first year, either passed alone or through a bigger bill, have now all been signed into law. And it's pretty cool to have your name on something like that.
Oh, yes. So just listening to both of you respond on this, first of all, it's very clear that we live in very partisan times. But I have to say it's refreshing to hear that a congressman from the Bronx, a Democrat, and a congressman from Long Island, a Republican, can find mutual ground to advance the people's agenda going forward. So thank you so much.
I love working with Ritchie.
I want to ask you, and this is a question for both of you. How do you approach bipartisanship? Because I think, as you said in your answer to the first question, as freshmen, it's not as if you have a lot of, let's say, authority to begin with. So how is it possible for you to operate in a bipartisan fashion if, as I think I'm hearing, the leadership may not always encourage that?
It's obvious that our leadership, the speaker and my leader, hate each other. I mean, I think it's clear. They don't like working well together, but I have never been discouraged by my leadership to not work with people from the other side, on the other side of the aisle. It's easy. It's easy to do it. Like I said, being in the extreme minority in the assembly, I had to be bipartisan to get something done. And Ritchie might be a Democrat and I might be a Republican, but I'm sure, both being from New York, I mean, I'm sure we agree on a lot more stuff than we disagree on. And those are the things that make it easy for us to work together on. We've collaborated on Homeland Security stuff. We've collaborated on Israel relations. That's just me and Ritchie. I mean, and there's probably a lot more we could be able to get to do together, especially when we're both on financial services next year. So you just got to find the issue that you can work together with someone on.
Okay.
Mondaire Jones and I have been trying to get salt back. It's probably the only issue that he and I agree on, I would think, but probably a couple others. But the salt restoration was something that he and I we have legislation in trying to fix.
Okay, Congressman Torres, your thoughts?
Like, I'm a Democrat and Andrew's a Republican, but we're Americans first and foremost.
Yeah.
And my view is we're part of the same household, the same family known as the United States Congress. And we owe it to the country to make that relationship work. There are plenty of people in my real family whom I don't like, but we figure out how to make the relationship work because we owe it to the country and because much is at stake. There's always been a performative dimension to politics, but there are moments when politics feels like nothing but a performance. Mm-hmm. And the extremes on both sides, the performers on both sides, often suck up all the oxygen in the room. And just my role is to focus on being a problem solver rather than a performer. And to never personalize, Andrew and I can have passionate disagreements. We should debate those differences passionately. That's part of what makes America great. It's our diversity of thought, our diversity of perspective. But when you demonize your colleagues, you're creating ill will unnecessarily. Mm-hmm. And you're creating a clash of egos and a clash of personalities that will stand in the way of problem solving. So I do my best to unequivocally state where I stand, and I'm never shy about expressing my opinion. And some of those opinions are unabashedly progressive. But at the same time, I try to avoid personalizing it. Yes. I try to see the humanity and goodness in the other side and recognize that there are issues in which reasonable people of goodwill can disagree. So that's the approach that I've taken.
Thank you, Congressman. And let me just follow up with you, Congressman Torres. Can you tell us briefly a little bit about your district and how it's recovered from COVID with the shutdowns and now we're seeing issues related to the supply chain and the resulting inflation and the other issues that are beginning to confront the economy or economic life in general. Tell us about your district and how it's responding to all that.
So I represent the South Bronx, which is often said to be the poorest congressional district in America. We were hit the earliest and the hardest by COVID-19. The Bronx had a death count of more than 7,000, which is larger than the combined death toll of Pearl Harbor and 9/11. And,
7,000. And just so, and how many are in the district? 450,000, 500,000? Something like that.
Congressional district has about 800,000.
800,000. Okay. Interesting.
Wow.
So 1% of the population nearly.
So we've seen a level of suffering that is unprecedented for New York City and for the Bronx. For me, COVID tells a larger story about the deeper inequalities in our society, and one of those inequalities is the digital divide. When COVID broke out and when we were making the transition from in-person instruction to remote learning, it became glaringly obvious that not every child had access to the internet. Not every child had an electronic device at home. And so we saw the digital divide during COVID deprive children of their fundamental right to an education. And I worry deeply that the loss of learning is going to have profound consequences that will endure long after the pandemic is gone. I mean, that to me is the greatest impact of COVID on my district, and we have not fully come to grips with it yet. And there's been some denialism about it. When it comes to the city at large, for New York City to fully recover, we must restore the central business district. But in order to restore the central business district, we have to ensure that the subway system is safe. Mm-hmm. Right? The extinction of the 5-day work week, combined with rising anxieties about the public safety crisis in our subway system, that to me is the greatest challenge to the recovery of New York City. So that's where my focus is.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Torres. Representative Garbarino, your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, I have to agree with Ritchie about, the education component. Everybody, the learning from home, people going, I have some very poor areas in my district too. I have some very wealthy areas as well. You saw you did see the divide in certain districts that didn't have the access, didn't have the investment, didn't have the tools to do what they need to do to keep learning at home, keep learning going. But from the richest districts to the poorest districts, and I imagine Ritchie, I think Ritchie would agree with this. The working from home, what it did to the mental health for these students, not being able, this is a lot of these kids. This is when they learn. This is where they learn socialization skills. This is where they learn how to talk to people. They make friends. Going to school. I see it in my nephew. He's 13 now, but when this started, he was 11. When I used to take him out to dinner or summer lunch, he used to be able to, talk to people and just he was a fun kid. And now after 2 years, being from home, staying at home all day, you take him out now. He put, somebody says hello to him, he puts his head down. He doesn't know how to socialize, and I'm very concerned about what that's going to do in the long run. That with the students and the children. But on top of that, a lot of my businesses, I have a lot of small businesses in my district. If you don't work in the city and travel in from around, you run a business
sure.
out of Long Island, and whether you're a restaurant or just a mom and pop store, you were shut down for a while. And you had to try to go home. You had to try to survive. You had to do whatever you could to survive. A lot of places didn't. A lot of places did. And now once they got out of that, or as we're getting out of that, inflation and everything else is crushing them. The economy's crushing them. So it seems like one problem after another.
Yes.
And it's just as the people who survived were coming out of the pandemic, the businesses, now they're getting hammered in a totally different way.
And, it sounds like both of you can agree on the importance that small business has, both for economic and job growth. So, Representative Garbarino, as a member of the Small Business Committee in the Congress, what can that body do to promote economic recovery? And how has the committee worked with the SBA and other administration officials to that end?
A lot of tools were used, especially during COVID. And they were overseen by the SBA. You had the shuttered venues operating grant program. You had the restaurant revitalization program. You had the PPP program. You had the EIDL loan program, which is a complete disaster, and it's going to probably turn out that billions of dollars in fraud happened with the EIDL program because of they eased qualifying. They eased the rules to qualify. We need to learn from this pandemic. We need to learn what worked, what didn't. We need to fix the issues of these programs. SBA right now is pushing to do a lot more direct lending on its part. That is something that I don't think is a good idea. The EIDL loan was done by SBA. I think it needs to work with institutions. A lot less fraud happened in PPP. I think it was a very, very small percent, like maybe 1% to 2%. They think EIDL could be as high as 60%. The last report we got. So we need to learn what worked and what didn't. And the one thing, we've had a lot of hearings as to what happened, what small businesses need right now. SBA needs to focus on fixing the regulatory burden, and they need to figure out a way to promote the pipeline for job growth. There's not enough people who want to work right now. Businesses can't get employees. SBA needs to figure out how to work with schools or institutions, apprenticeships, to get people trained and get them back to work because the businesses really need it.
Yes, and Representative Torres, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Look, the majority of businesses are created by small businesses. So as goes small businesses, so goes the rest of the economy.
Yes.
I do think for the most part, however imperfectly administered, the PPP has been a success story.
Oh, 100%.
Because I've heard repeatedly from businesses that but for the PPP program, those businesses would have become extinct.
Now let me ask you this, Representative Torres.
Absolutely.
Wasn't the goal, one of the goals of PPP was that the money not get returned? In other words, if the borrower met the terms of the loan, they wouldn't have to repay it. In other words, they continue to employ members of the community. That was one of the terms, wasn't it, to not have to pay the loan back?
So even though it was technically structured as a loan, it was a forgivable loan. It was essentially a grant.
Yes.
We promised it as a grant, and that's a promise that we should keep.
And so would you say that how would you, when you say it was a success, PPP, what would you base that on? Would you base it on let's say the fact that not a lot of the money was returned, it was mostly forgiven? Is that a good metric or a good indicator of the success of that program, perhaps?
It prevented the economy from falling into an even deeper recession.
Yes.
It prevented small business owners from going out of business. It enabled those businesses to retain their employees, employee retention. Those were the express objectives of the programs, and those objectives were largely met.
Good.
I'd think 90%. I just jump in. I think 95% of members of Congress would agree that the PPP program did what it was supposed to do, and I think any small business that utilized it would agree that but for that they probably would not have survived.
Good.
So I think a lot of people are very happy with how it worked.
So Representative Garbarino, I know that in your time in the New York State Assembly, you served, I think, on two committees there. You were on the Committee on Insurance and then the Committee on Banks. And I think everyone on this call appreciates the extent to which financial services, the industry here in the greater New York area is so critical, not only to greater New York, but to the nation. It creates a lot of wealth, billions of dollars worth of wealth and so on and so forth is created here. So let me ask you, how have you been able to, let's say, translate your experience in Albany on these matters to Washington, D.C.? How does that help? How does that help the New York economy, particularly related to financial services and the ripple effects it might have?
Oh, well, I don't sit on the Financial Services Committee yet. I hope to next year.
No, I mean, but in New York State, you're on the Banks Committee, right? Right.
Yep, I was on the Banks Committee. I was the ranking member of the Insurance Committee. So Patrick McHenry, who's the ranking member on that committee currently, he wants me to join him next year. He loves the fact that my background, I have a background in insurance. He also loves the fact that we also, when I was an attorney, represented the Islip Housing Authority. So federal housing law, federal housing programs is something I'm also familiar with. So he loves both of that. So, both my law experience and my committee experience in Albany will help when I'm on that committee next year. But it's not just about next year. Republicans are hoping to be in the majority next year, and we're hoping to be able to have a governing majority. And
I assume both of you wouldn't agree on that point. You agree on a lot, but not on that last point.
On what?
Republicans being in the majority.
He's hoping that the Republicans will be in the majority next year.
I've never been in the majority before. I'm really looking forward to it.
I think our analysis would probably be the same, but our hopes are different as to.
Yes.
Okay.
But as a governing majority, Lena McCarthy has put a focus on coming up with, we don't want to start on day one. We want to be prepared with bills and ideas. So Patrick McHenry is the leader of McCarthy's created a couple of task forces to focus on different things. One is the task force on jobs in the economy, to come up with sort of like a contract for America. Newt Gingrich had one, so we're trying to come up with something similar. And because of my experience, McHenry has me on that task force, working with him to come up with ideas of what we can do next year, bills that we can work on and pass if we're in the majority.
Okay.
I'll say if.
Terrific.
So that experience has helped me get on that committee, and it'll help me even further when I'm on the committee, hopefully with financial services next year.
And Congressman Torres, let me ask the question in a slightly different way to you. And I know you've alluded to this, and we have other questions where we can get maybe further in down the road in detail. But in general terms, what is it you think we should be doing, you should be doing in Congress or have done to help promote the financial services industry? The interests as it relates to the broader economy and the citizenry?
Well, first, I'm looking forward to serving with Andrew on the Financial Services Committee, and I think well of Congressman McHenry, who's the ranking member and would be the chair if the Republicans were to take over. I have found him to be exceptionally thoughtful, and he's the kind of Republican with whom I could easily have a working relationship. So I've enjoyed my interactions with him. To your question, look, for me, finance is the center of New York City. New York is the center of finance in the world. And as a member of the New York delegation, I have a vested interest in ensuring the health of the industry. This is not to say that I'm going to agree with the financial services industry on every issue. There are differences of opinion, but overall, I have a vested interest in advocating for the survival and success of the financial services industry here in New York. And I wish every member of Congress had that perspective. If you're in Texas, you have a vested interest in the survival of the energy industry. We should have that same ethos in relation to the financial services sector in New York City.
Okay. So, Representative Torres, you also sit on the Committee on Homeland Security and the Committee on Financial Services. So what kind of policy recommendations do you have for ensuring cybersecurity for individuals in the growing fintech space?
So cybersecurity to me is the most consequential issue that is neglected.
Neglected? Still
neglect-
neglected?
I think it's less so, but it gets far less than its fair share of federal funding, in my estimation, and most state and local governments.
How is that possible in this day and age, given what's going on in Russia and Ukraine right now, and the president's refrain in the last month or so that we should be gearing up for some type of cyber assault, cyber attack? How is it possible that people haven't responded to that?
No, the paradigm is shifting, but the culture shift that we need is not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen over time, and we're only beginning to wake up to cybersecurity in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But keep in mind, most state and local governments do not even have a dedicated budget item for cybersecurity. These state and local governments tend to have an IT budget, of which cybersecurity might be a component, but it deserves a budget item of its own.
Hard to believe.
But for me, the best cyber offense is defense, and the best defense is cyber hygiene. There's a wide range of practices that all of us should adopt to secure ourselves in cyberspace. And foremost among them, in my opinion, is multi-factor authentication. Every level of government, every owner and operator of critical infrastructure, multi-factor authentication. Here in New York City, in New York City government, the law department suffered a severe breach because it did not implement multi-factor authentication. The MTA had a breach because it did not have multi-factor authentication. So that is the simplest, most cost-effective investment that we can make in our cyber defense.
Okay. Representative Garbarino, your thoughts?
I'm the ranking member on the Ritchie, and I also serve on, or we will maybe serve on both committees together next year. We'll see. But I'm the ranking member on the cybersecurity, and he's right. Even though cyber's been in the news with the hacks of the pipeline last year, and now with the with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there is still not that heavy focus that there needs to be. I think 80% of critical infrastructure is held by private companies.
Yes.
And there's not, there's the rules and water authorities are overseen by the EPA. The EPA
Right.
is an environmental group. Should they be overseeing the cybersecurity part?
Can I ask you one question as you're answering this question? I don't mean to interrupt.
Sure. No.
You made that statement. 80%. I think it was 80% of companies handle their own cybersecurity.
No, 80% of critical infrastructure is owned by a private company.
Okay, yes. So in this country, unlike many others, it's left to the private sector, right? So yep. as it appears, there may be an imminent threat from folks overseas. People are saying, well, what is the government doing about this? Well, the government's doing its best, maybe, hopefully, right? But we've made a decision to effectively allow the private sector to handle this, not the government. The government is way behind on this, right? So let me ask you, as a Republican, what do you think about this? Should the government be more involved directly? I saw the Biden administration came out with some guidelines. Who should be handling this? Is this a private matter, or is it a public matter, or is it some form of partnership?
There's definitely a partnership, and there currently is already a partnership going on.
Okay.
A lot of your industry already works with the CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, as to and that's a volunteer basis. It wasn't mandatory. It's something that the pressure, it's a good working relationship, and you want that relationship to exist the way it is. You don't want it to feel adversarial, because then it's really about the flow of information, and you want that free flow. And if all of a sudden a company feels like they're going to get prosecuted because something happened, they might not share information about a hack, and by not sharing that information, now 10 other companies might get hacked. So we want that free flow. We passed, there was a bill that was just passed as part of the CR. There was critical infrastructure reporting language If there's an attack, you have to report with CISA within
Yes.
72 hours. You know, the FBI tried to sneak its way in at the last second. They tried to get an amendment to be part of that. Industry and the administration and Congress all said, no, get out. We've been working on this legislation for over a year. You're not, you're not screwing up now.
Yes.
So, you know, we have this bill. You know, it doesn't start right away. The rulemaking is now into effect, and I suggest everyone on this call, you have a CISO, you have, you know, your company has, they should all send in their comments during the rulemaking period when CISA does it. Homeland Security does it. You know, let's make sure that this works. This is a very important piece of legislation that was signed into law. It's something that we, for our protection, for our critical infrastructure protection, it's something that we need to make sure works right away. When they're doing rulemaking, make sure you get your comments in.
And thank you for pointing that out. And hopefully everyone on this call will heed your advice. Representative Torres, you have a comment.
I think you were skeptical when I said whether we were sufficiently prioritizing cyber. I will point out, when we were marking up the reconciliation bill, the $1.5 trillion reconciliation bill in the House, each authorizing committee had to mark up a section of the bill, and the smallest section went to Homeland Security.
Yeah.
So in the grand scheme of a $1.5 trillion bill, Homeland Security cyber received less than $1 trillion, less than $1 billion.
And the problem is the current budget, what was just proposed, we just had the hearing with the secretary the other day, they're requesting less money for CISA, $100 million less this year than they got last year. So it's, we're supposed to be giving more money to CISA so they can grow. It's just, the connection is off there. The head of stress, the director, Easterly, she is unbelievable. She is the right person to be running that agency. She has support from, I think, both.
What's her name?
Support from both sides.
What's this person's name?
Jen Easterly.
Jen Easterly. Okay.
Yeah, phenomenal. I've met with her. She's phenomenal. She's got the right attitude, the right mentality of what CISA should become. We just need to make sure that we provide the adequate resources. So CISA should become a lot of, like Russia, China, they're spending a lot of money on, a lot more money than we are on cybersecurity.
Yes.
We need to double down.
And of course, since we're talking about cybersecurity, that must mean we're in the digital world, so to speak. And obviously another very important aspect of this digital world are crypto assets. And I noted with great interest recently, Congressman Torres, your op-ed piece in the New York Daily News, a liberal case for cryptocurrency. And I thought you offered a very thought-provoking perspective on why crypto needs to be regulated, both on a federal and a state level. And just curious, why do you think this issue should appeal more to Democrats? And how do you approach your fellow Democrats on this matter?
Well, keep in mind that I'm in favor of reasonable regulation. New York State has the worst crypto regulatory regime in the country. It can take up to 3 years to obtain a bit license, which it favors the most established, most moneyed crypto businesses. And there have only been about 30 licensees, even though the license has been in existence since 2015. So
Representative Torres, I saw you on the Bill Maher show recently, and Bill Maher was railing about it took him 3 years to get approval for his solar panels.
Yeah.
So I guess that's something that New York and California have in common, is extraordinary red tape.
So I'm in favor of streamlined regulation that would preempt the states, because ultimately crypto should fall within the realm of the federal government. On the subject of crypto, I feel like what we often hear the libertarian story about crypto, the crypto as a means of either circumventing or subverting government and central authority. I have a greater interest in the progressive or liberal story of crypto as a tool for problem solving. I represent a district that is chronically unbanked and underbanked. The Department of Consumer Affairs did a study showing that residents of New York City spend more than $200 million a year on check cashing fees. And I represent immigrants who pay these predatory fees, what I would consider predatory fees, to send remittances to their loved ones abroad. And so I'm interested in the potential that crypto has to create a much more efficient payment system, a better, faster, and cheaper payment system without the long delays and high fees of the traditional payment system. So that's one piece. The second piece is the South Bronx historically has been the birthplace of hip hop. It has a wealth of creative talent. And there is an opportunity to train artists in places like the South Bronx how to create digital art and how to profit from digital art on the blockchain.
So this is NFTs now.
NFTs, right? And smart contracts that can collect royalties on your behalf. So I am just fascinated by the transformative potential of crypto. And instead of stifling it, we should be promoting it to achieve what I think are progressive ends.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Representative Garbarino, your thoughts on this?
I'll agree with Ritchie. You can't kill innovation, and the concern is, Ritchie and I probably bring the, he's younger than me. We probably bring the average age of Congress down quite a bit, and the problem with some of the people that have been there for a while, they don't understand it, so therefore they don't want it and don't trust it.
Right.
We're seeing that. Albany just passed some crazy crypto regulation. You can't crypto mine if you produce your own power, but there's carbon involved. It's like we should not be stifling this. We should be. There's got to be regulation. There's got to be some regulation because you don't want people taking advantage of it. With the theft, but there is so much. This is the future. It's not going away. So if it's not going away, we should help lead it to become, the way it can help a lot of people, way it can be safely done. We should not get in the way of innovation, but we got to make sure it's done properly. So that's a fine line that we have to work out. But right now, they have too many older members, I think, that just want to stop it.
I agree with Andrew. The Congress is a gerontocracy, but what I have found is that most crypto innovators want to be reasonably regulated, want to be licensed, want to operate within the law, but there's a lack of regulatory and legal certainty. Right? You have overzealous regulators like Gary Gensler accusing crypto businesses of speeding without actually telling them what the speed limit is. And that's regulation at its worst and most destructive.
Mm-hmm. But it sounds like both of you are in the camp that says that some regulation most likely will enhance adoption of the use of crypto assets and make it safer, presumably, hopefully.
Yep. Hey, and the FEC just approved a platform to allow political donations using crypto. So it's government agencies are starting to warm up to it.
It's very interesting. And I'm sorry, gentlemen, but we're running out of time here, and I want to make sure I get all these good questions in. And Congressman Garbarino, since you have the floor here, let's talk a little bit about the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the threat of Russian cyber attacks. It's brought the possibility of those attacks, no question, to the forefront of public discourse. So as the ranking member of the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Protection and Innovation Subcommittee, what can you tell us about U.S. critical infrastructure and the steps that are being taken now, steps hopefully that have been taken to safeguard our critical infrastructure in this country?
CISO, like I said, CISO works very closely with all of these groups. Each critical infrastructure has an agency that oversees it. Department of Energy oversees nuclear. Like I said, EPA oversees the water. CISA does. DHS does a couple for itself. We are already attacked. Everybody on this call say you're attacked probably thousands of times, if not tens of thousands of times a day. Russia has the ability to shut down a power plant or a hospital or a bank for a day or two right now. They have it. They haven't done it yet, but we are in a position where we can't stop them. If they wanted to hit us with a heavy attack, they could.
So why haven't
The
they?
problem is because we could probably do something worse to them through cyber. Our offensive cyber abilities are probably a lot better than theirs, but our defense is pretty bad, and that it's where the investment needs to be made. And again, at the end of the day, it's not just monetary investment from the government. Ritchie talked about it before. It's just clean practices, that people have to do. A power plant's weakest link is somebody at the office opening up a phishing email on the server.
Yes.
Not changing a password, not updating your computer. That's the weakness. I never updated my computer or my iPhone because I hated the way it would. I'm like, I hate these new updates. I'm gonna do it until I found out that most of these updates are fixing back doors into your system. So I update it all the damn time. It goes down. Our cybersecurity, our protection to make sure that we don't get hit, goes down from the lowest level worker up to the government. Everybody's got to work together on the same. Everybody's got to work towards the same issue. But the fact right now we could be hit, and the fact that we haven't, I am surprised. But I think the only way it is because if they, what they could do to us, we could probably do to them tenfold.
Okay, that's fair enough. And Representative Torres, I know that you recently introduced Reveal Risky Business in Russia Act. Can you talk a little bit about what that's all about, please, and why it's so important?
So as you know, one of the purposes of securities law is to require publicly traded corporations to disclose risks to investors. Doing business in Russia has become a risk. Russia has threatened to nationalize the property of American businesses. Russia has threatened to incarcerate or do harm to employees who voice political dissent. And so if you're a member of the investing public, you have a right to know whether a publicly traded corporation is doing business with the Russian government or has business operations in Russia. That should be subject to disclosure under securities law. So that's the rationale for the legislation. Okay.
And gentlemen, how do you see that playing out? Or how do you see this playing out, this whole situation in with Russia and Ukraine? Where do we go? Where do we go next with this?
It's a quagmire for Russia. I feel like it is a catastrophe for the people of Ukraine, who may never fully recover. But it could be a geopolitical win for the United States in the long run. Russia has revealed its weakness to the world. It made a miscalculation in underestimating the resistance of the Ukrainian people, and it made a miscalculation in underestimating the unity of the West. Europe and the United States are more united than ever. And the combination of the two is a powerful counterbalance to China. And we're sending a message that if you invade a sovereign nation state, there will be consequences. You run the risk of being isolated as a pariah. And I once heard a State Department official make what I thought was a seminal observation about the Chinese Communist Party. She said, the Chinese prize stability above all else, which I thought was exactly right. And
interesting, yes.
If China concludes that invading Taiwan is bad for business, is destabilizing, then China will think twice. And the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I imagine, has China thinking twice.
Interesting.
No, I would agree. But I mean, Russia, you have now Germany, you have the countries that have been dependent on Russia for fuel, for gas, to power their countries. They're now finding other places to go. Yeah. This is going to be very bad for Russia in a few years. It's already very bad for Russia, but they're not going to win this war. And their people are gonna be the ones that have to get Putin out, and how many, how long that takes to happen. I can't say. They haven't give us that briefing yet. But I do want to agree with Ritchie. I think because of what has happened, China will not. If China wants Taiwan, it knows it can't go do it militarily now because of what's happened with Russia. I do not see a Chinese Communist Party invasion of Taiwan with military.
And General, if I can just play devil's advocate here for a second, I find it very interesting that our press has been very quick to say that the world is against Russia. The whole world is against Russia. Yet you see, in addition to China and the usual list of suspects like North Korea, Venezuela, Iran, you have countries like South Africa, Brazil, India, the largest democracy in the world, okay, all abstaining. And if you bother to look at the press in these local markets, you find there's a very interesting different perspectives on what's happened there. And I'm just curious, when we say we're going to win and they're going to lose, is it that clear cut?
I think it is.
Okay.
I think the fear of alienating Russia and China might cause some countries to abstain, but the overwhelming majority of countries have condemned Russia. Countries that we never thought would impose sanctions have agreed to impose sanctions.
Yeah. I don't see a pathway. I think it's that clear cut. I don't see a pathway to victory for them. Where's their pathway? What is victory? For them. I just don't see it. The damages to them it's just done.
Yes.
And it's getting worse every day.
Yes.
Putin, and think about what was Putin's objective. His objective was to annex Ukraine.
Yes.
He failed. And his objective was to weaken NATO. If anything, NATO's stronger than ever.
Yep. Countries are going to join, maybe.
And the lasting legacy of Russia's invasion is the militarization of Europe.
Yes.
In Europe, which is an
it's interesting. So to that point, you see countries that have been traditionally neutral, like Finland and Sweden, are now anxious to join NATO. Whoever would have thought that, 5 years ago, 10, 20 years ago. So he certainly has accomplished the exact opposite of what he intended to do. So it's all very interesting there. So just out of curiosity, how do you see the midterm elections shaking out?
I don't even know. We don't even know what our districts are yet.
That's right.
Are you kidding? I don't even know where I'm running.
That's interesting. That's right. That's right. Can I also ask you this question? And I've heard this, and I'm sure you've heard this said before, that there's a tendency for members of Congress who are in safer districts to feel as if they have more latitude in terms of, let's say, the party line. If you are in a district where you're very reliant, let's say, on your national organization, you are tethered more so to the party, and you have less latitude. You think there's any truth to that?
Not in my case. I'm in the bluest district in America.
Right, and you have latitude. You seem to speak your mind, and so does Congressman Garbarino. I think it's refreshing to hear members of Congress not always parrot what is coming out of the leadership.
That's an interesting argument, because I could just as easily make the argument that if you're a frontliner in a swing district, you have a greater incentive to rebel against the orthodoxy of your party. The textbook example is Joe Manchin, who has seen a surge in his approval ratings.
Right.
Even though I'm frustrated with him and every Democrat is frustrated with him, it's good politics back home in West Virginia, judging by the approval ratings.
Yeah. A Republican in West Virginia who's in a primary with another Republican just cut an ad and released it of Joe Manchin endorsing him.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah. That's fascinating. Right.
But as for me, it's I was in an R3, then the new districts put me into an R11, and I was getting primaried for the right because I voted for the infrastructure bill. But now I'm going to be in probably closer to a swing district again. You know, what I think what's more freeing for me, it doesn't matter if I was in an R 25 or an R or a D6. You know, this isn't my life. Like I can, if I lost re-election, I could go back to work and be happy as an attorney. Like that's freeing for me. It allows me to do what's right for my district instead of having to worry about every vote I take, whether or not it's going to hurt my re-election. And not every member, a lot of members of Congress don't have anything else to do, and this is their livelihood. And so, you know, all they're worried about is, will this vote help me win or lose? Sometimes that's more important for them as whether it's right or wrong for their district. You know, did the voting for the infrastructure bill, which I never thought I would get a primary opponent for getting voting for roads and bridges, but you know, it was right for my district. It was right for New York. That was enough for me, other than saying it was probably going to hurt me in my reelection chances.
Yes, interesting. And how about you, Congressman Torres? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like ultimately it depends on the character and courage of the elected official.
Right.
If you're a person of integrity and principle, then you're willing to speak your mind, even if it means doing what is politically inexpedient. But second, we were elected for a reason. We both were elected in fiercely contested races. We know our districts, and we're going to make our judgment about what's in the best interest of our districts. We have our finger on the pulse.
Right. And what do you see as the big issues, let's say, for the class of 2022? Looking forward.
Apart from the economy, public safety is a real crisis.
Yeah.
From 2016 to 2021, the murder rate has risen by 60% in New York City. It is a national trend, and I have been powerfully outspoken against
and Congressman, do you think Mayor Adams is taking the right approach?
I feel like he's striking the right tone, but the city is no safer today than it was on January 1st.
Yeah, I've seen some of his critics say that he's been in office already several months and nothing's happened. I mean, doesn't it take a little bit of time to sort of figure out how things work? Not that he doesn't know how things work, because he's been around for so long, and he's certainly in terms of qualifications, he has high qualifications.
Look, we are all in positions where we have to grapple with forces beyond our control. But when you run on a platform of public safety, when that is the signature issue of your campaign, you have to deliver. And it's not as if nothing's changed. The city's less safe. Like,
yes.
Are up. Murders are up. The city is less safe today than it was when he assumed office. He still has time to reverse course, but public safety remains the number one issue.
Yeah, the city's, for those of us that have been around a while, the city has the feel of the late 70s and early 80s. Right.
If Republicans take the majority in the House, I think you'll see there'll be those are two issues: the economy and the crime. I think you'll see them focus on energy production at home, as well as the border. And the question is, are Republicans just going to pass a bill that can't get through, that they can't become law, and will just be a stalemate for 2 years, or is there a win for border/immigration, energy production/green stuff? You know,
I know we didn't talk about it up to this point, but I have to say immigration is one issue that I think a lot of us find very perplexing. It just seems to be so front and center. You cannot turn the television on and not see it. And it just doesn't appear as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'd love to hear, I know we have only a little bit of time here, but love to hear your thoughts on this. What should the government be doing on immigration? Congressman Torres?
It's a big question.
What's going on with that? Why does that seem to be such a, I mean, we'll all agree it's important, or maybe some of us would agree it's important, but it seems as if we're unable to wrap our arms around it, or our head around it first.
Well, it's become a political football. Look, what we need is comprehensive immigration reform, which would include border security. But we have become increasingly incapable as a country delivering solutions on the largest issues affecting the nation, and immigration is Exhibit A.
Yes. Okay. And I'm going to give you, Congressman Garbarino, the last word on this because we're running out of time. Just to be, you could be brief. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's I don't know if it can be done as one big bill, but I think you could find a majority to solve every issue if it's broken up into like 4 or 5 packages. There's some people that the line in the sand is border wall funding, or the line in the sand is pathway to citizenship. But I think you can find a majority on every issue that needs to be solved if you broke the bills up. They're passed, together, but I think I don't think you'll be able to get it all done in one big bill. I think you got to chip away at it.